Ugnayang Pang-Aghamtao is the national organization of anthropologists in the Philippines. It is also known as the Anthropological Association of the Philippines. Since its founding, UGAT has been conducting annual national conferences not only to discuss professional concerns, but also to make anthropology more involved in national issues affecting Philippine society and culture. And this year is quite special because UGAT has organized 3 regional conferences in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, with the last leg here in Visayas, hosted by the University of San Carlos. To formally begin our program for this morning, we shall have the singing of the national anthem to be followed by the invocation. We apologize for some technical difficulties. At this point, we shall now proceed with the opening remarks from the UGAT, or the Ugnayang Pang-Aghamtao President, Ms. Susana Roldan.
Welcome participants to the UGAT 42nd Conference. We were euphoric about the very successful face-to-face conference in Visayas last year when we began planning for this year's conference. The UGAT theme was supposed to be on the anthropology of encounters in anticipation of the marking of the 500th year of Spanish colonization in 1521, to be hosted by the University of San Carlos. But the universe had other plans for us as we ended up encountering SARS-CoV-2, more familiarly referred to as COVID-19. Much as we want the global pandemic to be over, we were all confronted by this historical moment felt by all of us. It is no surprise that the themes of the organically organized activities converge around the theme of encountering COVID-19 in varying contexts. In Luzon, Anthropology of Encounters, convened by Melvin Habar, Jesse Vargas Jr., Eileen Mijares, and Skiltila Basillas, meant 2 webinars encountering COVID and 2 webinars on topics we could not let go. One webinar on collaborative research in the seascape comes from a growing interest in maritime anthropology, given our archipelagic country, and a continuing conversation on IP education integration that UGAT has been called upon to assist, given the research and engagement of the founding elders and members. Mindanao's regional conference is on encountering the COVID-19 virus in Mindanao, people's responses to the pandemic, convened by Augusto Gatmaitan. Visayas Regional Conference, Encountering Colonization and the Pandemic in the Visayas, Local Experiences and Responses, convened by Zona Hildegard Amper, Enrique Eracion, Jose Eleazar Bersales, kept with the intended theme, including today's unraveling future history. We bring you this year's conference slated from November 16 to 28, 2020, hosted by different institutions in 3 regions where UGAT board and active members of the organization are found. Profuse de La Salle University Social Development Research Center and Ateneo de Manila University's Department of Sociology and Anthropology, Anthropological and Sociological Initiatives of the Ateneo. Ateneo de Davao University in Mindanao, and University of San Carlos in Cebu, for accommodating us and for making this conference possible. Our deepest gratitude. Despite the difficulty of dealing with the pandemic, I commend the working board and the active UGAT members for keeping it together despite dealing with their personal issues such as death or sickness in the family, restoring health and well-being, coping with shifts in online-offline lives, job insecurity, caring for others, and staying afloat with problems during such a challenging year. Thank you, conveners, speakers, moderators, and participants for agreeing to take part in UGAT's 42nd conference. This conference reflects the fighting spirit, hard work, and the hopes of people to overcome our encounters of today.
We would like to thank Ma'am Susanna for that opening remarks. Now, at this point, we once again welcome all of you to day one of the Visayas Regional Conference of the 42nd UGAT Conference, hosted by the University of San Carlos here in Cebu City. We have a total of 18 paper presentations for days 1 and 2, and we hope that you will be able to join us today and tomorrow for all of these presentations. Now, I have the pleasure to actually introduce to you our keynote. But before that, we will have the conference overview with the Vice President for Visayas of the Ugnayang Pang-Aghamtao, Dr. Zona Hildegard S. Ampere.
Morning. Sorry, I cannot start my video, but I'll just give a conference overview without showing my face. Wait. So, I'll just share my slide. Can you see my slides?
We still can't see your slides, Ma'am Ding.
Sorry. Wait. We practiced our participants, but we did not practice ourselves. Sorry for that. So I'm here. Sorry.
Good morning, Ma'am Ding.
Morning again. Welcome to the Visayas leg of our UGAT conference for 2 days, today and tomorrow. So the decision to can you see my slides? Wait.
Yes, Ma'am Ding.
Okay. So the decision to hold the 42nd UGAT National Conference in Cebu was in line with the fact that we are approaching the 500th anniversary of Lapu-Lapu's victory as well as Magellan's success in circumnavigating the world, and the introduction of Christianity in this country, of which Cebu is of great significance. However, plans to hold the conference at the University of San Carlos, a shared center of excellence in anthropology, were put on hold as the COVID-19 pandemic placed restrictions on mass gatherings. At first, UGAT was hoping that things would normalize after a few months. But as the number of COVID-19 infections increased and with no cure and vaccine developed yet, the UGAT board decided that instead of having just one national conference, UGAT will be holding 3 regional conferences, one each for Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao to be conducted virtually. So this is actually the last leg. So they finished with the Luzon and the Mindanao conferences. So the suggested theme revolved around how the pandemic has affected people across social class, ethnicity, gender, and age in different countries, highlighting anthropological insights necessary to provide a grounded analysis of the situation from various perspectives. However, the Visayas Regional Conference Organizing Committee decided to proceed with the original theme on encounters, drawing parallelisms on how colonization has resulted in significant sociocultural changes and on pre-colonial indigenous cultures, and how the pandemic has ushered in a so-called new normal that has also drastically changed the way people interact and transact with each other. So both significant events and their long-lasting effects on cultures of the Visayas shall be scrutinized in this conference, specifically on local experiences and responses. So before anything else, I'd like to um, acknowledge our very active organizing committee for the UGAT Visayas Regional Conference 2020. Aside from me, of course, I have our keynote speaker later on, Eleazar Bersales, and a colleague from Silliman University, also a graduate in our PhD program of USC, Dr. Enrique Oracion. And the conference secretariat with our junior faculty from the Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History, Marjorie Dino and Regina Yoma, and two of our graduates from our MA and PhD programs who are now teaching in other universities in the Visayas, Romeo Turing Jr., who is now connected with the Visayas State University, a graduate of MA Anthropology in USC, and Bonifacio M. Amper Jr., PhD, now teaching at Cebu Technological University Carmen Campus, a graduate in our PhD program. For session moderators, Ms. Dino, Ms. Yoma, and Mr. Turing will also be moderating later on, as well as another junior faculty of our department, Andrew Jan B. Fernandez, and two of our graduate students in the master's program who are teaching also in other schools, Jamal Omamalin and Daryl Mishka Watin. So of course, providing coordination for all the regional conferences of UGAT this year is our Executive Director, Jesse Vargas Jr., who is based in the De La Salle University, pero Bisaya sa Bisaya, he's from Tagum, Davao del Norte. So, as mentioned by Regina earlier, we received a number of abstract submissions, but we had to trim this down to those that are focused on the Visayas, aligned with either colonization or the pandemic, research-based, and utilizing an anthropological lens in discussing various phenomena being studied. So we have a total of 18 papers to be presented today and tomorrow, 11 of which focus on various aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic, while 7 focus on experiences and responses to colonization. So this will be presented in this first ever UGAT Visayas conference. So in the past, we always had national conference. It's just this time that we have solely for the Visayas. So all presenters focus on Visayas issues and concerns. So the papers focus on a variety of provinces in the Visayas, from Cebu, Bohol, Aklan, Tacloban, and all over Iloilo, etc. So presented by our colleagues from various colleges and universities in Central, Western, and Eastern Visayas, and even from other regions. We have friends from Pampanga, Cavite, but their studies focus on the Visayas. So all these papers, the abstracts of these papers are contained in our book of abstracts, which you may access in our Facebook page of the USC Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History, or in the UGAT website or the UGAT Facebook page. So for this virtual platform also enabled us to reach out to a greater number of participants. So we have logged more than 200 registered participants. I don't know where the others are. They're still coming, I think. So we have more than 200 registered participants. Since the limitations of time, space, and funds are no longer hindrances. So there will be no breakout sessions, thus all papers in all the panels shall be presented to everyone, providing a wider venue for interactions. So in terms of age, we can say that most of our participants are in the younger bracket. Most are in the 20 to 29 and 30 to 39 age brackets. Of course, we also have the young ones and the ones young. Okay, so we don't discriminate in terms of age. All ages are welcome, all genders, etc. Okay, so just to see whether our participants are active, or can we do a quick survey? You go to menti.com and you use the code given on the screen, 74, 79, 58, and 7. And then you will be asked 2 questions, just 2 questions. Can you go there now? Okay. Can you answer, where are you currently located? Okay, so Central Visayas. Can you see the screen? The Menti results on your screens? Of course, because we're in Central Visayas, 38% say that, no, 40% are in Central Visayas. And we have Eastern Visayas, Western Visayas, and of course from Mindanao, Luzon, and even outside of the Philippines. Okay, so they're still answering. Okay, so almost half are from Central Visayas. Okay. That's it. Wait, they're still answering? Okay, so almost half are from Central Visayas, so very good. We know that our participants are really very active because you're answering our quick survey. This is just a way to see whether we still have people listening to us. This is the difficulty of virtual conferences or even classes in our respective classes. Okay, so more than half are from Central Visayas, and we have from Eastern Visayas, Western Visayas, and also from Luzon and Mindanao and outside of the Philippines. So for the second question, where did you learn about this conference? Oh, a lot say that they're teachers. So the teachers are asking their students to participate. Very good teachers, because this is a great learning experience for our students also. So teachers, so it's from the UGAT website, Facebook page, also from USC Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History Facebook page. Niapas ang teachers. Teachers again, 24%. Okay. So more or less, almost 1/3, or no, just more than 1/4 quarter, just over a quarter, got it from the UGAT website and Facebook page, and around 20% from the Dash Facebook page, and also from their teachers, as well as an email and friends, etc. Okay, so thank you very much for participating in our mini mini survey. So let's go back to our sorry. Okay, so we also looked at the registration on whether or not the participants are UGAT members, and we saw that a lot are not members. So that's why we are inviting you to sign up as a member of UGAT. You just visit our web page. There are instructions there on how to become a member. So I think that's it. We look forward to your active participation in this conference, 2-day conference. And we hope that you will learn a lot of things from our speakers on what's happening in the various parts of the Visayas. So thank you very much again, and good morning.
Daghang salamat, Ma'am Ding, for that very comprehensive and very exciting conference overview for days 1 and 2. So I hope all our participants would actually be more interested and engaged throughout the conference. All right, so before we proceed with the keynote address, I'd like to remind our participants that we will have an open forum after the keynote address. You can ask, for those who are on Zoom, you can ask through our chat box. You can leave your questions there, or if you have anything, a comment or a suggestion or anything that you would like to address to our speaker later on, you can leave that on our chat box. And for our viewers on Facebook live stream, available on the USC Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History Facebook page. You can also ask questions and leave comments below the live stream as a comment or under the comment thread. Our team will try to accommodate as much questions as possible during the open forum. And now I have the pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker. Jobbers, or more formally, Dr. Jose Eleazar R. Bersales, is the director of the University of San Carlos Museum, manager of the University of San Carlos Press, and the head of the USC Communications Office. He is also a professor of archaeology and anthropology at the USC Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History. Jobbers, who trained in archaeology at the New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, was a German academic exchange scholar at the University of Bielefeld in 1996 up until 1999, and an Asia Research Institute ASEAN graduate scholar at the National University of Singapore in 2006. He was also a national president of the Pang-Aghamtao in the early 2000s. Currently, Sir Jobbers heads the National Committee on Museums of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCCA, and is the Cebu Provincial Consultant for Museums and Cultural Heritage. He has written or co-authored a number of heritage books, including Salapi, the Numismatic Heritage of the Philippines, which won an Anvil Platinum and Anvil Gold in the 50th Anvil Awards 2014, as well as The War in Cebu, a finalist in the 2016 National Book Awards. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker for this morning's program, Dr. Jobers Bersales.
Thank you very much, Reg. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Thank you very much to the curator of USC Museum for this introduction. I am very glad to be back at the UGAT. It's been quite a long time since I've been with UGAT, and I disappeared for a while when I shifted to archaeology. I mean, I went to the field of archaeology, and so I'm very happy to be here. I'm a replacement keynote address speaker because I'm also part of the secretariat, which is, so it appears like this is an in-house event. Actually, it would have been Dr. Resil Mohares who would have been appropriate to do the keynote, but he turned down because he's very busy. So I'm the substitute. So spare me the difficulty of questions later because very little preparation to do this, but I will endeavor to. I've been to present to you my keynote address. If I will be given screen sharing rights, host has disabled attendee screen sharing, so I cannot share my.
For a while, sir. Let me address that technical problem.
We will learn about all these things as we move to the new normal, when half of our teaching will always be like.
All right, you can now share your screen, sir.
Okay. So the talk I will be delivering this morning hopefully ground much of the discussion in the next 2 days. Title of the paper is Paradise Lost, Paradise Never Regained. It's a question mark because I'd like to ask that to others also to determine whether we really lost so-called paradise and we never regained it. So Visayan society and culture amid Spanish conquest and expansion. I will talk first about how we lost the so-called paradise, the indigenous, when we were not yet colonized. No? I talk about the Tornaviaje, the Conquista, Entradas, Reducciones, Encomiendas, and the depopulation that attended the initial colonial project of the Spanish, of Spain. Then I'll talk about what I mean by paradise never regained. It's a question mark. I'll talk about native resistance and the Moro raids or retaliations. And then I'll talk about the Catholic mission and the defense of the native and the role of the Spanish missionary as our initial ethnographers and lexicographers. Finally, I will make some conclusions based on the way I look at the things that happen, that continue to the present. Syncretism, acculturation, of course, revolution. Let's start with the Tornaviaje. Magellan was, of course, a Portuguese, we know the story already, so I'll not belabor you anymore with that. He was funded by a private company, Belgian or Dutch, that supported the Spanish crown, which fitted 5 ships. 3 of them eventually reached the Philippines. One was, 2 others. One mutinied right at the Canaries. The other one was scuttled as they reached the southern tip of South America. Only 3 made it to the Philippines, landing in Homonon, which was a sacred ground, as a sacred burial place. They found people at Limasawa, and after that they went to Cebu. It was here in Cebu that Magellan stayed for about 3 weeks. He could have stayed longer, I think, if he was not killed by the Lapu-Lapu of Mactan. Here in Cebu, he left legacy that continues to this day. And that's the Santo Niño. I think a week after the arrival, April 7, he arrived. April 14 was the first baptism of the chiefs, the wives first, and the retinues of women, and then in the afternoon, the chiefs and their baganis, their warriors. Was it a conversion to Catholicism? No. Even the Catholic Church does not presume that this was a conversion, but this is the planting of the seeds of conversion. It was clearly Humabon and his chiefs, allies, the 9 allies of the 9 confederated, but 9 allied chiefs that were occupying the shore settlements, coastal settlements, up to what is today Compostela and Danao. And they're named in Pigafetta. So we have in Pigafetta, the chronicler of Magellan, the first historical account of how Cebu looked like and what the people were. Would this have happened if the Spaniards did not arrive? Yes, we would still have had chronicles. I think you look at Cambodia, you look at Vietnam, you look at Thailand. They had writing. There was writing already somewhere, but not in Cebu. But by the time, like as we arrived, the Baybayin was already used in Cebu. And so, while we thank Pigafetta for our early descriptions of Cebu and of the Cebuano, the Cebuano language, I don't think it would have been impossible for us as uncolonized people to yeah, okay. So that was a strange noise. Okay. Now, but history has happened. These things have happened. Lapu-Lapu resisted. Magellan participated in a local skirmish when he was instructed by the Spanish crown, King Carlos, the time, the second. Yeah. Not to participate in any local skirmishes. But he did. And as a result, he died, and the Tornaviaje, the circumnavigation, was fulfilled not by Magellan, but as they say, Enrique de Malacca, the slave he bought in Maloco, or as the Spaniards would say, by Sebastian Elcano, who Pigafetta hated so much, probably because he is not mentioned in the entire leg of the Tornaviaje up to Cebu. You do not hear of Elcano. It's only after when he was the one commanding the ships. They burned the Concepcion, brought the Trinidad and the Victoria to Moluccas, and there the Trinidad stayed behind for provisions and was eventually scattered also for repairs, and then it was the Victoria that I think made it back to Spain almost 2 years later, just a few days shy of 2 years after the expedition. So we have in Pigafetta the first ethnographic accounts, very limited, but we have, for example, a ritual performed by a babaylan and her assistants, or her trainee babaylan. So the slaughtering of pigs, I think it was in commemoration of a death or something like that. Slaughtering of pigs, and they looked at the sun. Pigafetta said, they are praising the sun. Of course not, because as you know, we don't like the sun so much, no? Because it's very hot. I think our concept of langit was looking up to the clouds. Basically, what we need in a very dry, parched landscape like Cebu, we need the rain. So I don't agree with Pigafetta's conception that they were looking towards the sun for the sun to shine. This is April when they arrived. It's the heart of summer. I don't think a Babaylan would look for the sun at the height of summer, but that's a Western interpretation. And this is what falters what causes the ethnographies of later ethnographies of Spanish missionaries to falter, that the misinterpretation of social practices and of identities that they met, social identities that they met along the way. That is why only a critical reading of missionary accounts will bear out what was really going on in the Philippines. But we nevertheless have to thank Pigafetta and all the others that followed for the writing about them also. Now, the Viceroy of Mexico, on behalf of the King of Spain, writes a letter addressed to the King of Cebu, Humabon, to be sent also to Lapu-Lapu, asking for apologies. Why Magellan participated. So there's this distinct letter never delivered. Legazpi also brought the same letter with him, but he never showed it to us. No? Letter of apology for participating in a local battle which they should not have had, which they were not required to. They were forbidden to do so. It was carried by the Loaiza. There seems to be a red line. That's not mine. The Hofre Garcia, Hofre de Loaiza expedition of 1525-26. This was an expedition that looked for the survivors of the Magellan expedition. There's another line. That's not mine. Okay. Maybe I'm being time. Okay. So the Hofre de Loaiza came to, never reached Cebu. Those lines are not mine. Someone is, or being hacked probably, but anyway, it's not the X-rated hack, so I can understand. Okay, so Loaiza was sent and did not succeed. There's another, Saavedra, 1 year later or 2 years later, also did not arrive in Cebu. Villalobos only reached up to Leyte and Mindanao. Then eventually you have Legazpi. Legazpi arrives in Cebu. I think 5 ships or 4 ships. And initially, of course, Tupas, the prince who was with the prince who was on board the Capitania, the Victoria, to negotiate with Magellan when they arrived, together with Kulambo and the other chiefs, was Tupas, who was the nephew of Humabon, son of his older brother, I think, and who married also his daughter. So there was this, the incest was going on among the chiefs. It's a way of expanding alliances or controlling wealth, which would have been very difficult for Catholic conversion. You cannot convert natives who marry among themselves, their children. It's not allowed in Catholic doctrine. And also polygamy. Pigafetta mentions a lot of this. I mean, Legazpi and all the other chroniclers mentioned polygamy, which I'll explain later the value of that polygamy. I hope I have time to explain why this practice was prevalent among the chiefs. So Tupas was of course frightened. He knew. He was familiar with the Portuguese, which controlled the territory of the Philippines. The Philippines was inside the Portuguese sphere under the Treaty of Visayas. And so Tupas was familiar with this. And Tupas remembered Magellan. He was about 16 or 18 years old when Magellan arrived. So it was about 60 already, 18 plus 44 years. Exactly to the day of Magellan's death, the fleet of Legazpi shows up on the horizon in Cebu and starts firing salutes. Tupas on his entire settlement, Banay, Cabanay of Cebu, abandons the city, the settlement, and begins resistance. About 2,000 of these Baganis actually meet the Spanish when they land in Cebu. And so bombardment happened. the story is that Tupas burned the city, but actually the bombardment of Legazpi may have caused the city, the settlement of Sugbo, somewhere in for San Pedro, in where the city hall is, where the Magellan's kiosk is located, up to here, the edge of the Guadalupe and Butuano rivers, would have been the settlements under Tupas already by the time. So Tupas did not occupy a Raja position, the high position, like, for some reason. It was just like Datu. It was just selected from this regular selection of chiefs, of hereditary chiefs. The story goes that a day later, among the embers, the burning embers, there was one house that was not burned, and that was clearly a chief's house. Why did that house not burn? Because in a chief's long house would have many rooms in it compared to the houses of Timawa or the Bagani, the warriors. And there would have been a clearing around it. That is, I think, the reason why this house was not burned. The houses of the settlement were too far from this house, I think. And then they discovered the Santo Niño, and that starts a devotion that continues to this day. A devotion which actually is beyond Catholic practice. It carries with it a lot of syncretic and cultured practices that harken to the pre-colonial period, which I'll talk about in the conclusion. So after 2 weeks of resistance, Tupas, the Spanish sent parties to Tupas, and the negotiation begins. Tupas, of course, makes as much of resistance as possible at the settlement. They don't provide food to the Spaniards, but they enter into an onerous treaty with Legazpi. They will protect each other. But if ever a native Cebuano would commit crimes against the Spaniards, Tupas must present this for a hearing for punishment by the Spaniards. But if a Spaniard committed a crime against the people of Tupas and Sugbo, the Spaniard must be brought back to the fort that was constructed by the Spaniards, and it's the Spaniards that punish the person. That's a very clearly an onerous treaty, and he tells Tupas, move your settlement south of Guadalupe River, which is now San Nicolas, because we will build a Spanish colony, or at least a temporary settlement, while awaiting orders from the King of Spain. So he builds a fort right on the spot right in the section where Tupas and his settlement of Sugbo used to be, while the Sugbo moves to San Nicolas, south of the Guadalupe River. And it starts a controversy today. The controversy is that the Santo Niño was found there because it's called Sugbo el Viejo, the old Sugbo. No? But current literature and historical documents state that Santo Niño was found right at the spot where the basilica is, between the basilica and the convent of the Santo Niño is right now. Now in 1569, the King of Spain sends a letter arrives from the King of Spain to colonize the Philippines. So between 1565 and 1569, the question of colonization was actually in limbo, and those that helped bolster the plan to colonize were the Spanish, the Augustinian friars. Here is a set of islands waiting to be Christianized. So it was the question of conversion. It was that we have to save the souls of these Indios because they're all demonic. They have all kinds of practices that will not save them from the fires of hell. So it was the Spanish decision to convert, and coupled with Legazpi's position, bolstered by Martin de Rada, who would be a defender of the Indios, that the Philippines was a good jump-off point for Japan and China. And that's where the real conversion should be carried out. Because these heathens, these chinky-eyed heathens that are waiting to be converted. Now, because there was constant resistance by the natives, even if they cooperated, they feigned cooperation with Legazpi, but they stopped planting. And so you have the beginnings of famine in Cebu. The natives stopped planting. And for 4 years, 4 years, you have no planting of millet, which grows in Cebu more than rice. No? Rice requires water, millet did not require water. So you have that problem in Cebu of no production. So Legazpi was forced to move the capital to Panay. It was in Panay that he found a lot of lands. No? But make no mistake, these discoveries and the expansion of the colony were attended by and eventually Manila were attended by so much oppression and misery on the natives. And this is quite a funny thing because tomorrow I'll be speaking at the CBCP conference. I'll be the speaker of the CBCP conference tomorrow on the expansion of Christianity. And so you have a split personality. You have a presentation here of how difficult it was. But I'm going to talk tomorrow also of the difficulty that was wrought upon the Indios, the natives, because of the sword and the cross. We will not be mincing words there also. Well, of course, with the transfer of the capital to Manila, Cebu, which was a prime port, not because it had resources, but because it was at the center of the Visayas and northern Mindanao. And it became a port, a trading port, I think starting in the late 1300s, because that's where we find evidence of porcelain in quantities, in burials. So late 1300s, about the end of the Yuan period, up to the arrival of Magellan. After that rapid decline of Cebu, to the point where you have only Spanish friars running the show in Cebu until the opening of the international port of the customs house around the 18th, until the opening of Manila to international trade, the formal opening in the 1830s. So, okay. Immediately when the Spaniards arrived, the missionaries were instructed to accompany entradas. What are entradas? Entradas are when Spaniards go to a settlement to subjugate it. The rules of the entrada were that missionaries must accompany them in order to prevent bloodshed. Entradas were supposed to show Spaniards entering a settlement on friendly terms. But of course, many entradas did not happen that way. Missionaries were not informed of entradas, especially between 1565 and 1571, where there were only 3 or 4 Augustinians in the budding mission, 7 at the time that 2 others went on, Augustinian missionaries in the entire colony. And so you have all these soldiers claiming all kinds of settlements because they carried with them, Legazpi carried with him the power of the Encomienda, which was to conquer territories, to control these territories for their labor and the products in these territories for the Spanish crown or for the Spanish officials who were loyal to in the conquest, loyal to Legazpi. And so these entradas were very, very bloody. Many communities disappeared wholesale. You look at maps, written maps of the 1600s. There are names on maps. You ask everyone today where those places are. Nobody can identify them. Why? They disappeared. No? Well, some of the disappearances were caused later by native resistance and Moro depredations, of course. The real encomienda was apportionment of conquered territories for productive labor. It started in Spain when they subjugated the Moros of southern Spain. So they had free labor and well, it's not supposed to be free labor, no? But what happened was free labor, including the Jews. But in South America, in Central America, it was practiced there also. And it came to the Philippines. The Philippines was now the last colonies. And overnight, entire settlements were identified under one encomendero or one Spanish officially. You control them, you have rights to extract from them their labor and their productive labor. So whatever fruits and all that, you can extract from them. But in return for that, you have to educate the natives, protect these natives from other natives that have not been conquered. Because before the Spaniards arrived, we were all warring against so many barangays. Villages were allied with each other, and we're fighting with other groups of villages for slave labor and for getting brides, you know, or for basically slave to plant in communities, in farms. So you have that, and then so overnight, all these arrangements disappeared because now you have the encomendero. And often these encomenderos were absentee encomenderos. They would just send their cobrador, who was usually a native elite member of the former dato class. Because you're familiar with Philippine society, it's a Visayan society before the end of before the Spanish arrival, was composed of an elite class of chiefs, you know, who were former baganis or warriors that showed bravery in battle and all that, and eventually became chiefs, and they elect among themselves who should be the paramount chief. They decide among themselves, and yeah, and so then you have the free holders, the so-called timawa. It's spelled timagua, but that's a Spanish spelling. It's pronounced timawa, the Mexican G. No, Mexican. The Spanish G. Timawa. It's not timagua. It's spelled timagua, but it's to be pronounced timawa. The freeholders, the free men who could attach to a chief and fight with you in this raid, but you're not totally locked together. After the raid, you could move to another chieftain. I'll join you in this raid or in this harvest of this large rice granite field you have, or of this millet. So they were free to attach themselves to any chiefs. And then down below, you have people who were indebted. They had debts, and that they had to pay these debts either with their children, with gold, or with their servitude for certain periods of days. It's not like American slavery. You know, that's a different kind. Our indentured slaves had debts that needed to be paid. You could go every Saturday to clean the house and help in the farm. And then the rest of the time, you could actually move to another person, but you had another debt. No? It's like, yeah, something like that. All of these were rent asunder. The chiefs were co-opted and some of them became cobradores to collect from what used to be their people, the income of the natives. Now, in order to control conversion and production, in order to control production and the settlements, in order to control the settlements, in order to control the settlements, many of them were relocated in order for the better collection of tribute of the fruits of labor, and in order to convert them to Catholicism. Many of these native settlements were reconstituted. This is called resettlement of relocation, which is very devastating. If you read Newsom's Conquest and Pestilence, which is one of the sources of this paper, you will see a lot of the damage to population due to this reduction, to the point that around the 1580s, I think, the Augustinians adopted a different system. They developed, the missionaries developed the cabecera visita system, where you have one big settlement where the Spanish mission would be based, And then smaller settlements of maybe 10, 20 houses would become visitas. So they don't need to converge onto the cabecera or the town, the mission town, but they were allowed to continue with their farms in the countryside, and then you would have a Spanish priest visiting them from time to time, which would be sometimes once a year. You know? As shown by my excavations in Bolhoon, which I unfortunately have not placed here, in the excavations, which was the subject of my doctoral dissertation. In Bolhoon, we found burials that had Catholic symbols. No? They had cross Augustinian medallions, and yet they were covered with plates. They had all this gold. They have gold. Gold. One warrior had a gold earring and a dagger, but he was also covered with yeah. And then they have a woman with 3 gold pendants. Clearly, I think the images of the Holy Trinity, and yet she was buried with a metal nut container and a plate and other things. So you have all this mixture of indigenous and Catholic practice. This is a result of the reduction of the cabecera visita adjustment to reduction, where you, instead of everyone going to the town and living there and taking 3 days to go to the farm, they allowed the natives to continue with their farms, and then a priest would just visit there, but rarely could a friar go there. At the same time, the Spaniards imposed tributo, pandala, and polo. The tributo was a tribute, no? Accepting of course, the native elites, because they would be the ones collecting. You have here the creation, which would later be identified by his name. This is when he talks of the Congress and all that, as the new principalia. You have a direct connection between the chiefs who were converted to Catholicism, became cobradors, cabezas de barangays, heads of the unit of collection of tributes, and they're exempted, including their children, from all these things, and they would accumulate wealth. Eventually, their great-grandchildren would become also cabezas de barangays. Later in the American period, they become mayors or presidentes municipales. And then in the post-war period, they became, many of them, not all, but many of them became politicians, political families. So by direct line, sometimes broken in certain parts, but a direct result of this concept of co-opting the native elite and then asking them to control their own people in new circumstances. The bandala was, in times of crisis or in times when the Governor General announces that we need to go to war, everybody should, other than the tribute, also pay for half a fanega of rice in order to finance, for example, the battle against the Moros in Mindanao, this was the diezmos de Zamboanga, I think, which was collected. 1/10 of the tribute was added. So aside from the tribute constituted, let me see, a tributo constituted 2 fanegas of rice or 1 piece of cotton cloth, kanang habol hinablon, that they were weaving. 1 piece of that constituted a tribute for 1 person, or 3 mais of gold, 3 gold nuggets. Equivalent, all of this was equivalent to 8 reales or 1 peso until 1580. In 1589, this was increased to 10 reales for a married man and 8 reales for single men. So you have now 1 peso and I think 10 centavos cuartos at the time. In 1604, it constituted 4 reales of cash, or 1 real for 1 real or a chicken. 1 real was equivalent to a chicken. So if your tribute is 4 reales, you have to bring 4 chickens to the Casa Tribunal, to the Cabeza de Barangay, who will then bring this to the provincial capital. No? You know, the alcalde mayor will be full of chickens and full of rice, and he would have stores, and that is where you have the beginnings of the corruption of alcaldes mayores. And then you have polo, extraction of labor. For people between 18 to 60 years old, they have to participate in the making of roads, building of churches, things like that. But they were paid. They were supposed to be paid. Unfortunately, many of them were supposed to be paid at a later time, but that didn't happen. Most of the early polo was to cut timber to make ships and to work in the shipyards. And so you have the beginnings of revolt would happen because of this polo. Imagine 60 days, you're between the age of 18 to 60. You all gather at the cabecera or at the native at the pueblo in order to go and cut timber. And it's not easy. If you're not used to cutting timber, that is not an easy job. It is a very hazardous job. Or if you are to work in the shipyards for the galleon trade. So the result was massive alteration of social practices. The disappearance, for example, of the social system, that not disappearance, but the subsumption of the social system in the pre-colonial period, resulted in, for example, disappearance of the bride price, which was an important element of wealth, power, and prestige of the chiefs, but had a function. So it ended polygamy, because now you cannot become Catholic if you are polygamous. So that caused the decline of power and prestige of women, because if women have a price, they could actually assert that price. And then the end of divorce. So women the power of women to divorce their husbands also disappeared because of the Spanish colonization and conversion. Now, fertility was controlled in the pre-colonial period. It was pervasive. This control of fertility was pervasive in Southeast Asia. It's not contraception per se, but it's spacing the number of children, especially if settlement has very few resources. We became Catholic, of course. The more babies, the more souls to convert. So there was an encouragement, and there is a biblical passage behind that. And go and multiply, which is the basis until today of many of Catholic views and doctrine. So you have increased pregnancy, and then you have epidemics and pestilences. Now, in the dictionarios of the period, which were prepared by, well, for example, Mateo Sanchez, Mateo Sanchez, the Jesuit Mateo Sanchez prepared a vocabulario de la lengua Visaya, which is basically Leyte Samar language. But at that time, even in Cebuano, the letter L was supposed to be R ang pronunciation. We were almost, according to accounts, we were almost speaking like Waray at the time. For some reason, we lost that. And the letter L disappeared in the urban areas of Cebu. Wala became wala. Wa. But in this period, you have certain terms in the dictionaries. For smallpox, for example, hanga. Syphilis, I think, also has a term. So it's clear that there was trading going on before the Spaniards arrived, and there were these diseases coming in. But since populations were controlled, were very sparse and few, you don't have epidemics. But when the reduction and the cabeceras and the pueblos and these resettlements happen, you have a concentration of populations, and you have the beginnings of epidemics. Like instead of smallpox appearing in one house, so far away from others, you now have an entire town, parish town, full of smallpox, which would disseminate populations as a result. And then you have added to that the creation of new farms and bringing people to these farms. You would have pestilences, you would have locusts coming in to decimate harvests. And you have, what is that? You have the population, you have famine. So the first 100 years of colonization, Visayan society and culture was totally rent asunder. You have a rapid, according to Newsom, in Conquest and Pestilence, you have a rapid loss of population, which is based on the study of Iterzinos and Mike Colonnade on his study of lists of souls, the libros de almas and the bautismos of churches, and they saw this decline of population, which, yeah, in part. Now, even despite this sudden dislocation and reforming of Visayan society and culture, there were periods of native resistance, you know, and most of this resistance were basically led by native chiefs and by bailanes or asug. Asug being men who had effeminate characteristics. There is one famous belief, I don't know if this is true, but there is one. And many people think that Tamblok, who led a very long revolt that inspired later the Dagohoy revolt and the Samurai revolt also in Samar, that the Tamblok was an effeminate warrior, no? A bayot, an asug. No? I do not have the evidence. But that is one of the positions people say of Tamblok. No? He was a babaylan who was an asug who was dislocated by all this burning of idols. And here we have a photograph of, a copy of detail of Fernando Amorsolos, the burning of idols. Catholic missionaries frowned on idols. No? And yet at the same time, since they could not find equivalents in the local language and could not stop local rites and practices, so they replaced the fiesta, the agricultural harvest and planting season. Every event in pre-colonial society, not just Visayas, but all over Southeast Asia, and also in Mexico and in Central America and South America. You have this agricultural cycle, which is marked by certain rituals. And they could not stop this because you have to plant during the arrival of the first winds. When the winds blow at a certain period, that's when you plant. So in order to encourage planting, but not the rituals, they replaced these rites with Catholic rites. And then they replaced the idols with specific certain saints. So you have San Isidro Labrador for laborers, and his feast is celebrated on May 15, which is the start of the planting season, I think, for rice and corn or any other crops. And so what you have then, you have this replacement, substitution of certain practices. And langit, for example, which we look up to as clouds, the sky, was reappropriated by the Spaniards, that's the Agustinians, the Jesuits, the Recollects, to mean heaven. And simba, to praise. And the simbahan, which are caves and sacred trees and all that, became the church. And later I will show to you how the difficulty of the mistake of conversion, of using these terms, because they could not, these were the equivalents in native languages. Which changed somewhat it's created a superficiality of beliefs and practices. But deep inside, you still have the pre-colonial belief systems that continue to this day. At the same time, because the Moros, who were the main trading partners of the peoples of the Visayas, of Luzon, of Mindanao, in fact, Manila was already Islamized by the time Legazpi arrived. The Muslims then and now were the ones that would go around the islands to trade, to exchange. You see, even until today, when DVD was popular, who would go to the mountains to bring DVDs? It would be Muslim traders, Maranao, Tausug traders. Even today, in Cebu, no, you still have the Maranaos and the Tausugs at Vision Theater. Maranaos, I think, selling all this bootleg software and all that. And they go around towns. When the Spaniards arrived, this was cut. because the natives would no longer trade with them. They were required to sell almost everything they had as tax to the Spanish authorities. And the Muslims really found that strange. No? These were very brave people. The Visayans were very brave. They were tattooed, and there's a story that they even reached Fujian coast and were raiding the Fujians, the Kines, the Amoy, bringing them south. What happened to them? Why are they so meek? Catholic doctrine requires meekness, no? Peace, love one another, things like that. And after a generation, when they started training, because the missionaries started with the children of the chiefs, because the chiefs were too old, they could not change their ways. They started with the children, and the children later, hereditary transfer of power, they became the cabezas de barangays also. They became the chiefs of the Hispanized settlements. You have people who did not know swordplay, forgot about the sacredness of the kris, not just a serpent, but every kampilan has a soul. It's attached to you. All these belief systems in warfare and all that disappeared. And the Moros came back and started raiding these settlements as a way of retaliation. That's why Muslims, they do not see this as raids. They see this as defense. They call these raiders as warriors. No? In the south, in Mindanao, the peoples of Mindanao, the Moro peoples, they frown upon the idea of calling these Moros as raiders. For them, this was defense. This was in retaliation for the conversion of the Visayans, who used to be their trading partners. And so they were defending their trading posts. That's the way they look at it. And this continues until 1850, when with the introduction of steamships. That's the only way it could stop. Well, partly this could be stopped by the establishment of watchtowers or baluartes, basically established by Augustinian friars and Augustinian Recollect friars to watch for the coming of these Moro the Pangos. 200 of them would arrive in one area and would move from one island to the next, taking all these slaves, putting them on caracoas, which would go directly to the south to begin trading in Ternate, in the Dutch colonies of Indonesia, for farms, while the raids would continue, and then another boatload would be brought out again. And all that. So this would result in the destruction and abandonment of pueblos. In fact, if you go by your local history, in Leyte, Samar, Cebu, Negros, all over, even in Luzon, most towns get formally established into municipios or towns. Municipio will come in the 1890s, now that term, but into poblations and pueblos only by around the 1830s, 1840s, when the steamships and when all these defense systems set up by friars would be effective in checking these moral rates. Now let's go to the final portion of the talk. I'm talking too much already, and that's the power of Keynote address. I think we can talk as much as we want. No, I will give you time for questions. Okay. Now, all Catholic mission, the Catholic mission, especially the Augustinian mission at the start, was not all that bad. In fact, in letter upon letter, Martin de Rada, who is called the protector of the Indians, wrote letters to the King of Spain, decrying the oppression being brought by Spanish soldiers whenever they entered or entrada a settlement. They would slaughter them, then they would make friends with them today. According to Martin de Rada, they would make friends with them today. The following day, they steal from these Indios everything, chickens, food, everything, and if they resist, they slaughter them. So you're talking a lot of, if these were Catholic natives converted already by the Augustinians, and they were slaughtered by these Spanish officials, civil officials. You were talking 100,000 martyrs. We must have 100,000 saints in this country, but we only have 2 saints right now, Pedro Calungsod and the other one. If these were converted to Catholicism and they died because they were converted. We're talking thousands should be saints by now. So the lessons of Bartolome de las Casas, the bishop, the Franciscan missionary, and who later became bishop, in defense of the natives of South America, were brought over by the Augustinians. And they wrote letters upon letters until letters of protest against the encomenderos and civil authorities. And then when they reported certain officers in Manila, the missionaries started arriving now in droves. They reported certain officers who committed crimes to Miguel Lopez de Legazpi. Legazpi said, bring him over, I will punish him. But he was paid with gold. There are reports like that. And these people were never punished. Miguel Lopez de Legazpi died in ignominy because of these corruption reports, allegations that he could be bought with gold. All these officers who committed crimes against the Indios could be when brought to Legazpi. Nothing happened to them. And then in 1581, the Dominican bishop, Domingo de Salazar, arrives from Mexico to establish the Archdiocese of Manila. Immediately, the following year, he calls a synod of all the missionaries all over the converted lands. The purpose of the synod was to decry the oppression of the natives and send this to the King of Spain. So you can see that the missionaries were concerned. These kinds of position of the missions, the scholar, the Santo Tomas, the Spanish scholar, Mojarro would say, would later establish the primal role of missionaries in the life of the natives. They saw them as defenders, and they became the only presence in many of these towns. And so much of this, so much power would be wielded by these friars. And then later you would know that the Dominicans would turn badly in Laguna. You have the beginnings of Rizal's experience there. But mind you, the Augustinians there was no such experience. For some reason, I don't know why, for some reason, in Cebu, in the haciendas of the Augustinians, there was no such experience of the cruelty of the Dominican haciendas in Laguna and Central Luzon. It did not happen here. So for some reason, that's why it was very difficult to start the revolution here in Cebu, because Cebu was very loyal to Spain because they didn't go through that experience. The other reason why I would like to think that there must have been a regaining of paradise, in that sense, a reclaiming of paradise, is because you have the beginnings of missionaries writing about the natives they were trying to understand in order to convert them. Now, many of them called the practices of Babaylands demonic and all that. But if you share them, you remove these biased positions of these chroniclers, you will find that you have the beginnings of ethnography, of people living on the site in the basic concept of participant observation, which is the main methodology in anthropology. You have Alsina, the Jesuit Alsina, who wrote so many volumes, but some of these volumes were made into wrapper for the Farmacia the Farmaciotica in Valladolid, Spain. So that we've lost them. But there are three of these volumes that managed to survive in the late 1700s, were eventually published, and later they've been translated, and they become the basis of so many of the discussions on how did Visayan culture look like. And it appears that we did not have the concept of barangay. We had concept of gamuro, which was a settlement, or of ginsakpan, ginsakupan. Our concept of who are with us in our settlement, or who belong to us, to our territory. We call them ginsakpan, from the word sakop, or gamuro, the community, not barangay. We call the ships, our boats, barangay, but we didn't call our settlements barangay. We call them gamuro, or ginsakpan, or sakop. Mga sakop, even until today, when you're in a reunion, we might say, in Cebu, mga kasakop na ko, or kabanay, kin. So you have all these chronicles and so many others. And then you have also the missionaries in order to convert the natives, they made vocabularios. And this is where we find the power of the missionaries. So many words today, so many words 300 years ago are no longer used today because of the disappearance of usage or of the object or the need for it. And so you look back into those vocabularios to a certain words which are useful in scholarship, in research, in understanding our past. You have, I cannot read, I will read the Vocabularia de la Lengua Cebuana by Martin de Rada, which has disappeared. We don't know where it is. Pedro Galende, who wrote the biography of Martin de Rada, Apologia pro Filipinos, defender of the Filipinos. That's the title. He says that Martin de Rada wrote a vocabulary. Within 2 years after arrival in the Philippines, together with Legazpi, he already spoke Cebuano, and he already converted so many. He was about 25 or 24 years old when he arrived, so his brain could still accommodate a new language. There's Arte y Reglas de la Lengua Tagala, Diccionario de la Lengua Visaya, y Iligayna y Araya de la Isla de Panay by Alonso de Medrida, which is used by scholars of that region when they want to talk about the past, because there's so many examples there and discussions of Iligaynon society. Vocabulario de la Lengua Cebuana by Tomas San Jeronimo, which has disappeared also. Vocabulario de la Lengua Visaya by Mateo Sanchez, which is available on the internet. You can download it. I think it's even been translated into English. Arte de la Lengua Pampanga by Diego de Barganio. And a translation was released about 10 years ago. Arte de la Lengua Visaya, Vocabulario de la Lengua Visaya Cebuana by Francisco Encina, which was later republished by the Spanish Costilla Friar Bermejo, Julian Bermejo. So I've come to the end of my discussion. I've been talking too much already. What has been the result of the centuries of conversion and colonization in Spain? Well, the most basic for the anthropological part of this talk, because this is an anthropological conference. You can see the syncretism and acculturation in lowland Cebuano Visayan society, even in Mindanao. It's very obvious when you see the simulum. This is a dance supposed to be with women holding candles to honor the Holy Child, the infant, which was given by Father Pedro de Valderrama to the wife of Humabon, who has no name, but is not named by Pigafetta because she's a woman. The Europeans have no concept of enshrining women at this time, so he just says he's called Queen Juana. I give you an example of a very basic syncretism that has happened and continues today. Here is Mauricio and his assistants. This was taken in the 1950s by Father Rudolf Raman, the ethnologist, German rector of the University of San Carlos. This is very telling of the kind of acculturation and syncretism that happened as a result of Catholic conversion. They are kneeling, which is in Catholic. Well, two of them are kneeling, which is in tradition, in following Catholic practice. One has his hands holding like that, which is Catholic, Christian. But the accoutrements of the ritual are manobo, or this is mamanua. The leaves of a palm, which are, then there's a box for containing the, I think this is for betel nut offering. One is not kneeling, in fact, but I think it's in the traditional position of what would have been the babaylans. And they have headbands to mark their authority. Then they're wearing all these materials that are woven, which are clearly traded material, from, probably from manobo. And so this is in the middle of the big Surigao forest in the 1950s, 1955, I think, to be precise. I'm sure the prayers are Catholic, but the ritual is still native. And this is what happened to with us. We are an amalgam today of many of the legacies of Spain in us. But deep inside comes out pre-colonial practices. At Santo Niño, the wiping of the saints' feet with a handkerchief, the kissing of the glass of the Santo Niño, the dancing of the Santo Niño, the Sinulog festival that holds the Santo Niño and dances around. It's against Catholic doctrine. A saint, you kneel down, pray in front, but you never hold him and then shake him around like that. That is not Catholic practice. The intimacy of Filipinos, of natives, with the saint, in the same manner that Queen Juana said, I would like that Santo Niño, that image, to be part of my images, that I collect, that I put in my room, is a sign of how we treat idols as part of family, which is not in keeping with Catholic doctrine. There's supposed to be a divide between sacred and profane. But in Philippine society, sacred and profane merge, and there is no difference. You have a doctor that will say the sign of the cross when he sees a cat crossing. He will not operate today. He will call, or she will call his or her assistant. Let's not operate today. I just drove a car and then there was a cat that crossed. You have still this superficial, this things that come out from time to time, and in the way we treat each other in our social identities, in our social relations, and in the way we practice faith. So many of these practices are not necessarily Western, they are East. This is like in Italy and in Spain, the concept of the little tradition and the big tradition. You have religion, Catholic religion, as the big tradition, but even in Spain, you have practices that are pre-Christian that continue to survive. So that is a normal and a natural flow of an imposition from the outside of certain values, which do not necessarily merge perfectly with existing values and practices. And also they amalgam, they syncretize. The same syncretization actually resulted in revolution. If you've read the historian Reynaldo Iliato's Passion and Revolution, it is clearly stated there that revolutionaries found meaning in their struggle and in their pain, in the passion and the passion, death, and in the 7 days of the Holy Week, the entrance, the triumphal entrance, and then the beginnings of the passion, death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. You have also millenarian movements. You have also this appearing from time to time, people who say they're the Santo Papa, and then they have all kinds of beliefs and all that. So that's that ingest is what has happened to us. Now, I tell you that these are the sources that if you're interested in the discussion, reading further. I'd like to end with this statement. This is an excerpt from the letter of the Viceroy of Mexico to the King of Cebu or his heirs in reference to Magellan's interference in the local events going on and the rivalry between two brothers-in-law. Lapu-Lapu's daughter, sister, according to Hinas de Mafra, one of the members of the Magellan expedition that survived and came back, that survived and wrote a short report. He says Lapu-Lapu's sister was married to Humabon. Don't know who that woman is. Could have been Queen Ivan. Anyway, he was participating in this rivalry. This is from Scotty. Why did Tupas betray the Kami? It reads, and for this disobedience, the Lord and Maker of all things permitted that he should receive the retribution for his disrespect, dying as he did in the evil endeavors which he attempted contrary to his prince's will. I think that sums up what happened to Spanish colonialism in its 333 years. I'd like to thank you very much. So, open to questions. If there are any, if there are none, I thank you for this opportunity. Yes? Are there any questions? I think you can talk, you can unmute and I will answer because the MC has disappeared. Is everyone sleeping now? I will sing so that we can wake up. I will sing a Spanish song, the Marcha de Cadiz.
Hello.
Hello, Doggers.
Okay.
Yes, Athena, you have a question for Sir Jobbers. Thank you very much, sir. I was cut off earlier because of my internet connection, a very reliable one.
Welcome to the Philippines. That is a result of the Spanish colonial endeavor, I think.
All right, I think Miss Athena typed in a question on our chat box, but you can have the floor, Athena, if you would like to ask Sir Jobbers your question personally. You can, yeah.
Yes, hello, Sir Jobbers. Yes, thank you. Hello, Sir Jobbers from Bohol. So I'm interested about the Moro raids or retaliation. So are there any records or accounts about what happened to the captives of these Moro raids? So were they sold somewhere else?
Yeah.
Or,
You need
yeah.
Francis Warren's The Sulu Zone. There he lists a lot. He provides tables. He even has names of some people who were captured. Many of them actually did not necessarily live a bad life. There was a woman, according to him, who got married to the Sulu Sultan or one of the chiefs there of Holo and was an advisor. So it depends on your circumstance, I think. But many of them were indentured into farms to plant the Dutch farms of Sumatra and all that. But, and then it was a difficult thing. No? They would be under a chief, and then they would be hiktan. I grew up with my mother used to tell me, no, and I don't know if this is true, but when we would be through once, magpabadlong, we would behave badly. My mother would say, "Sige, I will sell you to the Moro. Okay, they will cut your soles. They will slice your soul off and remove the tendon of your feet so that you cannot walk. And then you'll just be dragging your body the whole time while farming." I don't know if that's true, but apparently my mother grew up with that idea because her mother also told her that was what was going to happen to the people who will be enslaved. And I think that must have been taught by the Augustinian friars. Now be careful and all that because that is what they will do to you. So read if you have time or if you can find a copy at New Day Public, libreng advertisements at New Day. The Sulu Zone by Francis Warren. Comprehensive. And I think he followed it up with a second book, also published by New Day Public Press.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Athena.
All right, thank you, Athena. Thank you, sir, for answering that question. Earlier, before ma-disconnect ko, I actually read a few comments posted by our participants regarding the difference between Augustinian friars and their treatment to the natives compared to the Dominicans. Do you have a comment on that, Sir Jobbers? Like, how different were these friars in terms of their relationship or treatment towards the natives during that period?
Had snacks. I haven't had breakfast. I forgot. Okay. Allow me to swallow first. Allow me to swallow first Goldilocks pulveron. Okay. Now, this is the worst snack you can have for a Keynote because it gets stuck on your upper palate. Anyway, I can't tell you that I don't have. There's probably a book in Spain written in Spanish. There's a lot of books lately, by universities in Spain about analyzing the situation in the Philippines. It started in 1998 during the centennial. Many Spaniards were asked to do dissertations and to focus on the Philippines. Because of that, it continues to this day. So I don't know any specific, but all you have to do is look at Rizal and Rizal's mother's experience with the Dominicans, and then go to Pampanga, which was Agustinian, and Ilocos, which was also Agustinian, and you don't have reports. Not too many reports. There's of course the Basi revolt, which was a revolt against the tax on Basi, I think, in Ilocos. But other than that, in the Visayas, in Cebu, you don't have that kind of report. No report of difficulties. Only on people who cannot pay rent, they would be removed, and they would be replaced. Now, what happened in Cebu? If you look at the records we got from Valladolid in Spain about 3 years ago. What happened, in fact, was many of the rentiers of the properties of the Agustinians became the local elite of politics and commerce in Cebu. They became the Spanish mestizos later. No? They married into Chinese money, which was used to rent into many of these properties. There were 2 Agustinian haciendas here. The Hacienda de Banila de Italamban, which starts from where you have Careta Cemetery, straight to the USC Talamban campus, up to Pitos, up to Mandaue. No, AS Fortuna. I don't have a map, but those are Cebuanos, they can identify this. It reached to Mandaue and bordered the estancia of the Jesuits, which was confiscated when the Jesuits left. There's who bought so many of the properties there after when the Americans took over. William Howard Taft went to Vatican to buy the friar lands because this was the cause of problems of agrarian problems in Luzon. You know who bought most of the properties of the Hacienda de Manila de Italamban? The Owanos, a very famous family until today in Mandaue. Everywhere you look for titles of these properties. In San Carlos, University of San Carlos, Talamban campus was owned by an Owano and was bought, and part was bought by Father Bonzel in the 50s. It was owned by the Owanos. The properties beside that, the village where I live, across near San Carlos, the Sartonio village, is an Owano property. No? And so many others until today. So this would not have happened, I think, in the Dominicans. The mother of Rizal could not have bought those properties because of the onerous conditions there. But what happened in the Agustinians here, they became rich. At the same time that the Agustinians got rich, the ones who owned the properties also became rich for some reason. I think one reason is they were also donors to the Basilica, to the Santo Niño Church. The rentiers were also donors to the Santo Niño Church. So there was a good relationship. I can't prove that yet. I have to look at the voluminous records, but I suspect that was the reason. Very long answer for a very short question. Okay, thank you.
Okay, there are many questions coming in. So one is there any possibility that those who have their vast haciendas are product of land grabbing during the time of Spanish or Spaniards?
Yes. Yes, at the start. But the Spanish crown actually ordered the governors generals to take care of the natives, and many of the encomenderos, almost all of them, never went to their territories. You have an encomendero here or in Manila that owned the encomienda of Baybay Leyte, and he would be based in Manila the whole time. And an encomendero can only pass the right of the encomienda to one generation, to a child. After that, it goes back to the crown to distribute again. And the encomienda ended in 1720, the real encomienda. So you don't have really specific titles to property. It's later in the Spanish period, and it's more formalized in the American period when you have the Torrens title. That's when you have the beginnings of the problems of property ownership. So when I looked at the Augustinian records in Valladolid, which we have at the Cebuano Study Center, the digital copies at USC, what you see there is the expansion of the Augustinian Hacienda de Talisay and the Hacienda de Manila at Italampan by donation. You have so many people, no, who are about to die. But there is that joke in Burgis of Hilda Cordero Fernando. Hilda Cordero. Where he says that on the deathbed, I think it's in Burgis, on the deathbed of the wealthy cabeza de barangay who has many properties, he would say, the priest the Dominican friar would say, "Oh, hijo, mamamatay ka na. Hindi mo madala ang mga lupang yan. You can't bring," the foreigners here, no? "Oh, yeah, you're going to die now. You can't bring them to heaven. And so how much can you donate?" "I would like to donate my stagecoach." "Oh, that's 10 years in heaven. In purgatory." "I'd like to donate this 200 cabans of rice." "Oh, we deduct 1 more year, 9 years in purgatory." No? "Now I would like to donate all my parties." "Oh, that's, 5 years only in purgatory." Anymore. How much do I donate so that I'll have only 1 day in purgatory?" "Oh, you have to donate." Things like that. So that's, I don't know if that's the way it was done, but there were many donations of rich, of landowners, of their properties to the church when they were about to die or they were dying. I think they still do that now. I think a lot of rich people still donate when they're about to die. They donate school buildings, or they donate on behalf of their dead parents, which is good, which is good philanthropy. We should do that. I mean, the rich should do that, not me. No? Okay.
Wala madonate.
Well, the things there in the museum, we can donate that.
All right. We have actually a request from Ma'am Ladelin. Can you please elaborate about the family planning practices of pre-colonial women?
The spacing, of births. I am not familiar with the kinds of herbs that were used. But if you go to an herbolario, even until today, they will tell you which herbs can slow down fertility or can serve as abortifacients. Yeah. So that would have been very common among the Babaylanes. The Babaylans were healers. They were not sorcerers. No? Lain ang term ang for sorcerers. So, that's yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. This question is from Sir Maxino. Hello, Sir Maxino. Good morning. In 1597 to 1598, there was a referendum ordered by the King of Spain asking the Filipinos if they would accept the sovereignty of Spain. Is there any record of this in Cebu?
Okay. I've not encountered any record of that in Cebu.
Mm-hmm.
But that referendum was conducted through the friars. So you can imagine the result. Was it really freely afforded? Or was it like the 1973 referendum on the Philippine Constitution, where everyone was asked, "Are you hungry?" And so they all raised. But that's the story of the Marcos Constitution. Now, so many speeches in every town to vote on the Philippine Constitution. And then, when it's already 12 o'clock, so all the mayor had to do was, "Are you all hungry now?" And so everyone would raise their hands, and then a picture would be taken, they would be counted. Okay, referendum is passed. Yeah. So it'd be like that.
Okay. Attorney Siegfried is actually tuning in on Facebook Live, and he has a question for you.
Yeah.
Hindu influence is very apparent in the kingdom of Butuan, as seen in the artifacts in Butuan. Any comment on Hindu influence in Cebu? Because I read somewhere that a statue of a Hindu deity was found in Lapu-Lapu, but was lost to a fire to a certain museum in Metro Manila. I read that information from a newspaper clipping in the Balangay Hotel Museum in Butuan.
All you have to do, Siegfried, hello. Anyone has to do is to read Juan Francisco's Indianization of the Philippines. I think I have that book somewhere here, where he debunks all these beliefs that the Philippines was Hinduized in the sense of state institutions or quasi-state institutions. One or two idols found in Mactan and another one in Cebu, I think, do not make a Hinduized state. Diba? We found so many Chinese ceramics in the Philippines. Are we a part of the Chinese empire? Did we believe in the Chinese idols? Doesn't. So there's no logic to people who claim that the Philippines was a Hinduized state because Humabon claimed the title Raja. It was a common title conferred on Islamic Muslim rulers. How can Muslims in Malaysia, Indonesia, be called Hindu just because they carried Raj or Raja? So all these trappings, these semantic trappings, these names, this borrowing of titles does not make a Hinduized state. What would make a Hinduized state? Pigafetta said, when they arrived, the shorelines were full of grotesque looking, ugly, meaning ugly looking idols. Remember, Magellan was in India in 1509 or 1511. He was in the wars there for Portugal. He was no stranger to Hindu temples and Indian idols. So he would have told Pigafetta, that's an Indian. Oh, these people are Indians. They're Indianized. No, he did not. And that's clear proof that what they found there are the kinds of idols that you find, for example, the bulul in the Cordillera, or the equivalents in Fiji, in Marianas, in Guam, and in island Southeast Asia, in Papua New Guinea, or in the Papua in Indonesia. So what you have are animists. But they were trading with Hindus. They were trading, and there would have been Hindus staying here. They would have brought their idols. They would have prayed to their idols in the same manner that if you are an Iglesia ni Cristo and you go to the United States, you bring your Iglesia ni Cristo faith there. Doesn't make the whole United States Iglesia ni Cristo. So the arguments of people that the Philippines was a Hinduized state, give me a single piece of brick, red brick, because Visayas, Champa in Vietnam, Cambodia, and all those, the Hinduized temples either have sandstone, cut sandstone, or brick, and there would always be idols that are made of clay, and they're so easy to make. We would, in every excavation, we would have found so many of these clay idols. They're so easy to make, just make clay burn. They're not here, I'm sorry. But we were trading with the Indians and who were from Sumatra and all that, who were all over the place. That is correct. I mean, that is proven.
All right. Thank you, Sir Jobbers. We have a question from Jesse Varquez Jr. Daghang salamat, Sir Jobbers. It was said that the Spaniards did not fully assimilate pre-colonial Filipinos and thus annihilate local cultures like in the Americas because we didn't have the same volume of oros or gold that they encountered in the Americas. What are your thoughts on this?
The Spaniards failed simply because there were too few of them. Mm-hmm. And second, it was not necessarily about gold because they were looking at China. You look at the galleon trade, the purpose of the galleon trade was to get Oriental products from China and to deal with these products to the New World. That was the ultimate purpose of the Philippines. That's why for what, 250 years, the Philippines was an economy dependent on the Real Situado and on the galleon trade, the royal subsidy from Mexico. and the galleon trade. And it's very clear that when when Mexico became independent in the early 1800s, the galleon trade could not be sustained. And the Philippine economy was forced to grow on its own. So it's clear there were too few Spaniards here. The Spaniards here were bootleggers, many of them were adventurers. No? And the Philippine colony was too late. They already conquered much of South America. We came about 50 years after the entire South America, North America was settled by the Spaniards. If you were a Spanish adventurer, Spanish businessman, it will take you maybe 2 months to go to Mexico. It will take you 6 months at that time, early, 2 months to go to Mexico, Central America. 6 months to come here. Over so many typhoons, where would you go? You're a businessman. The Philippines will be the last in your mind. So you have some of the dregs of society coming in. Not all of them, but some. And so you have a failure in management, administration, to the point that the Spanish friar was lord overall in every town. He would appoint who would be cabeza de barangay. He would witness the elections and all that. And you have all the beginnings of this corruption, in that sense, or of the buying of prestige and power. Even in the Catholic Church, the rich always sit in front and the poor at the back. I remember one discussion in many of the biennial conventions on church heritage. One of the radical priests who owned ran a heritage church. He stood up and says, "Why should we preserve these churches? These are products of oppression, blah, blah, blah." No, even until today, in front of me are the rich, the poor sit at the back. And then he was answered, no, these churches were a product of subsidy from the king and labor from the people. The friar was the one that decided. So it was always the friar that was so powerful in all these towns. Now, so I hope that I answered that question.
All right.
Okay.
Another question here. Sir, what is your expert opinion on the revival of the Spanish language on Philippine education?
I grew up with 24 units of Spanish. It's very difficult, trust me. It's very difficult, but for me, I think if your interest is to work in Spain or to be a historian, you should learn Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
But if the purpose is just so that you have a foreign language, well, the Spanish language, Spain, the Spanish Empire left. It was in ruins already by the 1800s. So much so that they sold the Philippines for $10 million to the United States. Now, it will be an added burden, I think, to people who have no interest whatsoever in Spanish history or the past. So why burden students further? That's my position. Maybe these are people who are romanticizing Spain. Oh my God, go to the embassy of Spain and experience getting a visa. Trust me. Trust me. We will not talk about it here. But the ambassador was told about. My God, no, I was told at the start that if you want to apply for a visa going to Spain, better apply for another. So maybe they've changed that already. But.
All right. A question from Romeo De Taro. Sir, have you encountered a Hiligaynon dictionary during the 1500s or before that or earlier than that?
No, that was the only one, Mentrida, which you can actually download on the internet. You just type vocabulary on it. I think it's in archive.org, the one that uploads all these things, or in I think it's an archive.org, because I forgot the other one. Gutenberg, I think something like that.
Yeah.
But you can download the Mentrida dictionary. It's quite thick. Vocabulary.
Okay. Another question from Sir Ryan Melendres of UP Archaeological this program. Sir, ano ang mga oldest na tradeware ceramics ang nahukay sa Cebu? Saan ito nahanap?
Okay, this is very strange, Ryan. It's no longer part of my talk like the other one on Hinduism, but since you opened the discussion already, there were reports of Song Dynasty burials recovered in Cebu. In fact, in the book ni Imelda Marcos, there's a cup there dated to Song Dynasty from Cebu. But these are not by archaeologists. These are looted sites. These are sold through antiquities dealers. So there's no confirmation. We cannot. So the oldest, as a product of strict archaeological research, would be the ones that were conducted during the excavations at downtown Cebu, which dates to around 1300s. Ang earliest ceramics. And then there was an Iron Age, a late Iron Age, 900, Song Dynasty, Tang Dynasty period, which did not have ceramics. So that's very telling of Cebu as a settlement. It was probably not that much of a central port before the 1300s, because another burial was recovered by Dr. Carl Hutterer and Dr. Terrazas, which was Iron Age, no ceramics, dating around that 900 to 1100. So why no ceramics? Well, no one trading with ceramics, probably. But that's an outlier. We don't know yet. The only solution is to excavate further. But you're right, Ryan, looted ang site. Mga sites, karamihan ng sites come from, karamihan ng evidence for the Song and the Tang are from looted sites. No archaeologists present.
All right. Okay. Another question from June Velez via Facebook Live. The Augustinians owned the Talisay Minglanilla Friar Estate, and from them, the Velezes acquired these properties. Do you have any idea how they were able to acquire that?
In 1903, June Velez. In 1903, William Howard Taft, Secretary of War, was sent by President, I forgot his name, Herbert. No, someone else, was sent by, I think, Roosevelt to Vatican to negotiate the purchase of the friar lands. And it was purchased. I forgot the amount. Eventually, I think 1907, 1909 negotiations, this was bought. Okay? One of the contentious issues, other than the Aglipay religion, and this was the most contentious in the first century of the American colonial rule. What to do with this property. So this was sold, and the right to purchase went to the ones renting. So you had the first right to purchase. That means the Velezes must have been renting from the Augustinians in the Spanish period and continued renting until the Americans arrived, and they were told, okay, we bought it already, buy this now at certain amounts. So that's it. So you're part of the elite of yeah.
Okay. Question from Justin Jose Bulado. Are there any written sources on the various watchtowers throughout Visayas, especially here in Negros Oriental?
Well, I wrote a book. I edited, co-edited, and co-authored a book on the urbanization of Cebu, and there's a copy here somewhere. But it talks only of, can you get that, please? It talks only, I'm at Museo Cebu because Rich is at USC Museum. Our signals will just converge. But free advertisement, okay. Can you see the book? Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
It's an exhibit with the National Archives that we did at USC Museum. And in one of the sections there, I actually have, so self-aggrandizement, yeah, warning. I actually have an article here of the watchtowers in Cebu. But there is a book, this is Valdez Tamon's survey of the forts. And I think there are forts in Negros. No? So there should be a lot, because in Cebu there were a lot. I found a lot of watchtowers or foundations of watchtowers that still survive, no? Or that are foundations. There's a long list. So there should be in Negros. Some of them are probably piggeries now, or whatever, parts of buildings or restaurants, as what happened in Cebu. There's also one built a bar inside the watchtower two-story watchtower. No, so there should be it should be a physical survey, a cultural mapping, and I think you should do that if you're interested. No, wait, I'm not sure if the Spanish program for cultural cooperation still funds that, but you can probably get funding from somewhere, no? From somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
Well, there's a comment here from Sir Detaro. In Tigbuan, town of Iloilo province and
Bawan.
Kimbal,
That's
there were
Bawan.
Bawan were 11 watchtowers during Spanish period, but only a couple left, and most they are already in ruins.
That's sad. In Oslo, there are 14, I think, watchtowers, and they're all intact. Well, one is almost destroyed, but 12 of them are still intact, and they're all there in southern Cebu, in one town. Tigbawan, yes, that's amazing. Yeah. Any more?
On chat box, wala na question.
Or can I stop? Okay.
Well, we still have time. Encouraging other participants on Zoom. If you have any other comments or questions for Sir Jobbers related to the topic or any interests of yours for others. On Facebook, wala na yung question. Pero na ako'y pangutana, Sir Jobbers, if you don't mind. Now that the 500th anniversary of the circumnavigation and the Battle of Mactan is actually fast approaching, there are a lot of discourse on why are we actually celebrating it? Like, aren't we celebrate a form of celebration is a sort of like patronizing the Spanish period or the Spaniards in this case? Any comment on that?
It's our way of doing this to the Spaniards. So that's why we're celebrating. We're doing this to the Spaniards. We killed your first attempt at colonization, and we're celebrating that victory. So that's our end of the celebration. It's not that I don't like the Spaniards. It's part of history. It's already part of history. What we're going to celebrate, well, at least for the state, for the Philippine government, is the victory at Mactan. The end of the first tourist, as they would say, the death of the first tourist coming to Cebu in a very touristy area like Mactan. The Catholic Church will celebrate the Santo Niño and the beginnings of faith. So why celebrate? Because it's part of our history and it's a milestone. And everybody, I mean, people will ask, what is there to celebrate? We have reason to celebrate. And for me, it's like doing that to the Spaniards. It's like, okay, pierde mo, no? Okay.
Okay. Another follow-up question in relation to 500th Magellan's discovery. Do you know of any books about Father Martin Rada?
Oh yeah, here's one. I have a copy here. Apologia pro Filipinos, Defender of the Filipinos, by Pedro Galende. It talks about the defense of the natives that Indians talk about. Now, the latest book I have, I think I'm selling books. This is Jorge Mojaro edits the latest Vibal published books. There are 3 articles there from our journal, the Philippine Quarterly of Culture and Society, which is why I'm advertising at the same time. But there is an article here on the defense of the Indio. No, and very interesting articles actually. I've not read it yet. I didn't want to read it because I might be reading the story in this keynote. I know it must be interesting. And there's also the Babaylan and Catalonan in the early Spanish colonial period. I've not read it also. Okay. I was afraid I might be talking about them and not acknowledging the sources. But yes, that book, which is 650 pesos on Vibal, you just order, they will send it to you. You pay for shipping, of course, blah, blah, blah. Things like that. So Vibal should donate to UGAT for this advertisement. Oh, by the way, Apologia Pro Filipinos 1981 is no longer, it's hard to find. No, that's the problem. Yeah, it's an old book.
Okay, thanks, sir. Another question. What is your view on this seeming revival of the Baybayin script by several cultural enthusiasts in our country?
Oh yeah, that should be encouraged. It's time we showed to Southeast Asians that we also had our own language. You look at ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations conferences. Look, you just look at the surface of it. When on the last day they have pictures taken, look at the Filipino. We wear a Western attire called Barong Tagalog. All the others wear their costumes. I find that embarrassing that we must wear a Western attire, a barong, while all the others have their malong, their patadyong, their all kinds of things, which we used to wear. So we might as well go deeper. We did use that language. Why not introduce it? Now, young people will say, Susman, they're adding more to the pain of education and the difficulty, blah, blah, blah. But they will appreciate that when they go to Thailand and you read everything in Thai, you cannot read anything. You go to Vietnam, you cannot read anything. Then it's rest back time. When the Thai comes in to Cebu and they say, we cannot read anything. In Chinese comes to Cebu, you cannot read anything. And yet we can speak English. That's our, we can speak another language. So the only problem with Baybayin in the past was why it was never used as a language for transactions was because it's syllabic and it's intuitive. If you have a word that ends with a syllable, with a consonant, you don't know the vowel behind it. And you are supposed to be an intimate reader of that language to understand what the symbol means, no? And like, I'll give you an example. Give me a word that ends with a consonant. Well, let's have another discussion on Baybayin later. It's not part of my talk. Okay, sige. The Japanese solved that problem. No? The Japanese, they indicated that a letter U of the syllabary must not be pronounced. So when they speak gozaimasu, which is actually, thank you, arigato gozaimasu, that's the pronunciation. But it's spelled arigato gozaimasu. So it's still syllabary. There's still a symbol, zo. But the vowel is not pronounced. That was missing in Philippine Baybayin of the past. No? So you say bok bok. You would use the word ko or ka, the symbol for ka. But it's not, the A should not be pronounced. If you're not a speaker, you would say buboka, bokboka. So which means different. It means killing someone else, bokbok. A bokbok na bokbok of rice, which is an insect, now becomes killing. No? So intuitive, you have to learn the language and know that the symbol for ka, the a should not be pronounced when you're talking of the insect, bok bok. And I think they've solved that problem following the Japanese system. Now, there are certain words that are silent for that syllabic symbol. Kind of long linguistic discussion, which I'm not an expert of. Okay.
But there's a follow-up question, sir, in relation to that question. Which Baybayin version should be revived? Because it appears only one version is favored, or is this another form of linguistic or script privileging?
That you should. Well, I am not an expert, so I cannot sanctify one Baybayin over the other. It will have to come from a committee that's why it will take probably 20 years to get this done. Because you have debates all over the place, no? And all that. Yeah.
Okay. These two questions are actually of another topic, much more into anthropological studies, probably for students. One is, how can we actually popularize anthropology among young people, especially the Araling Panlipunan is the least liked subject in high school?
Huh? It's the least liked subject.
Yeah, this is from BB. BB Monkey.
You know,
That you,
in
yeah.
in you know, on hindsight, no, you all grew up with that kind of belief, no, that these are useless subjects. In all my dealings in Facebook, on Facebook, on other events, on other platforms, many people tell me that they regretted that they did not take courses like history like that seriously. So let them just regret for not taking these courses seriously. But seriously, I think if we talk about archaeology and the trading that we were doing, and that we had a distinct culture that could stand in front of others, of other societies, I think if we tweak the discussion and the teaching, then it will work. No, it will work. No, it depends on the kind of topics that we talk about. So in anthropology, I would focus on, for example, baybayin. Students can be taught to write their name in baybayin. They'll be interested. And then in archaeology, the problem, and then the problem in the Philippines, for example, the museums, is we're not like, and I hate to compare us with, for example, Thailand and Japan. Both countries, they start their kids visiting museums every year. But here, the moment there's one accident, nobody is allowed to visit museums. All field trips are canceled. I don't know why. I don't know why in Japan, it's a no-no to follow your kids should go on the school on their own. I was told they're asked to ride trains at grade 2, grade 3, or grade 4 on their own. Here, no. They must be accompanied, or the children to the elementary. For some reason, I understand that because it's very bad roads, all those things. But there are things that I think we can learn from Japan, like visiting museums for every class, so that they tend to appreciate culture and history. I think it depends. That's why I think DepEd is asking for localization of history. It's not just learning about Rizal, Bonifacio. There's so Tagalog. Look for your local heroes in Cebu now, in your town. So that's being done now with DepEd to make the teaching of history more attuned with people. They can identify with, yeah, no, he's in the cemetery. He's buried there. Oh yeah, this is Satua in front of our plaza. Now they can relate. It's when you teach abstract things that people will find boring, di ba? And only special people with special skills will like it. It's like mathematics. Who loves mathematics? Those who like mathematics. And those of us who don't like mathematics, we go to anthropology or sociology. I mean, anthropology.
social science. All right. So this is again more into research. What do you suggest are the emerging or potential areas of studies that young or neophyte scholars could actually explore?
Wow. Let me swallow the
Water, sir.
Pulveron block by Goldilocks pre-advertisement. Everything in Philippine culture is open to study, and everything is interesting. I think if you want specifics, look at traffic. Look at Filipino behavior in traffic, which is a favorite subject of mine. Almost all my columns in Cebu Daily News talk about traffic, not about history. No, that the culture lag between Western systems and human behavior, Filipino behavior. No? That's interesting. Now, it's difficult to study indigenous communities nowadays because of the empowerment of indigenous peoples, but that should not discourage you. They're intended for everyone to respect indigenous peoples. No? That's why there's a requirement sa IP. You go to the NCIP, get these permits, things like that. There's still a lot of things that are interesting in indigenous communities, their practices, the changes in their behaviors, in their material culture. They're very important. Now, if you're not interested in indigenous communities, you study your neighborhood, you study the urban locale, do urban anthropology. How did your city end up like this one? And that's urban anthropology. The formation of the city, the expansion of the city. Where are the poor? Why are the disenfranchised? Where are the wealthy? Why do they go there? Why do they choose to be? Because you go to Brazil. I was in Rio de Janeiro in 2013. Indeed, you'll be shocked. The rich are on the lowlands. The poor are in the favelas that are on the hills. It's not so. Filipinos love the rich. The most expensive properties are on the hillsides. And in Brazil, when you're poor, you go up. The rich are in the downtown area. That's an important thing to also study urban anthropology.
Those are interesting topic that you can actually explore for the person who asked the question. Okay, this is Colin from CTU, San Francisco. Doc Jobbers, do you have any idea what famous folk tales in Camotes group of islands that somehow reflect the culture of the Camotesanons?
No, that's very specific. I'm sorry, it will have to be Camotehanons who will do cultural mapping to elicit this from the out of interviews, oral histories will come out. So it will have to be you there at CTU. What's his name? Forgot his name.
Colin.
Colin, who will have to do that. And you know how to do that? You do cultural mapping. You start interviewing old folks. What stories they have. I'm sure there are stories. There are so many caves there that are made into tourist attractions nowadays, like Bukilat Cave. Bukilat has a story of how it was formed and who lived there and things like that. Start with those things.
Okay. Another one is from Sir Enrico Arrochon, Sir Ike. Folk Catholicism, also folk Islam, as cultural accommodation, signifies the advantaged position of early Filipinos in religious encounter with introduced religion. Would you agree with this position?
What was that? I was not listening. He's about to deliver a book and it's asking where I am. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Folk Catholicism, also folk Islam, as cultural accommodation, signifies the advantaged position of early Filipinos in religious encounter with introduced religion. Would you agree with this position?
Yep, and it's not only here, it's also in Europe. This is called the big tradition and the little tradition. And there's a lot of material on that in current anthropology and in annual review of anthropology. Look at the anthropology of religion. In every imposition of a big religion, of an institutional religion, there will always be everyday forms of expression of the previous religion trying to legitimize itself by using trying to continue by using the legitimizing aspects of the big religion. So you borrow certain things. You borrow the cross, you borrow but you use it in different ways. No, you bury you buy a virgin coconut oil and you put a cross so that it's effective. No, not just as a chemical, but as a religious thing. It's imbued with spirit. That's folk Catholicism and folk Islam. Yes, I agree.
All right. This one is from Ruben Balotol. What are your suggestions for us to start local research in Southern Leyte, particularly that we lack experts in history and anthropology?
Well, expertise begins with reading books. If people see me, and I don't agree, if people see me as an expert, I will say it's because I've read a lot. I've read a lot of books. And I'm still reading. In fact, LBC just called me up because they're about to deliver a book. I just bought a book on Facebook. Expertise happens when you acquire knowledge. You don't need to wait for someone to come in who says, I'm an expert. Start on your own. Go to your libraries. Read a lot of materials about the kinds of things you want to know. And you'll be surprised. Oh my God, I didn't know this. And your eyes will be open when you start reading. And after you start reading, That's when you begin to expand knowledge by confirming what you've read or going out and doing research in order to bolster what you've read or to challenge what you've read. It's all knowledge acquisition. So start with reading a lot of books, of articles, and the internet has a lot of online articles for free. All you have to do is know the keyword you need to type, and then you'll have a lot. But be careful, of course. Be careful with journals that are fly-by-night. No? Especially if they have very strange characters and the English is very bad. That's not a reputable journal.
All right. I think we're actually done with the questions. Oh, Sir Amsua studied Gigantes Island jars, excavations aside from naming the jars. What other studies can be done in relation to these jars?
What is that? Who did a study?
Sir Amsua. That was the name mentioned by Sir Romeo De Taro. Sir Romeo?
Can you tell us some more?
Yeah.
When was this study?
What
jars?
Hello. Hello, sir.
Yes.
Ma'am,
Yes.
good
Yep.
morning. I have a friend, the curator of Iloilo City Museum. His name is Sir James Mozart Amsua. And right now, he is studying on in Ateneo, taking a PhD in anthropology. And he has a study on the jars. He actually excavated several jars. Several jars in Gigantes Island in Carles.
When was that excavation?
Siguro mga ano na sir, mga previous 2 years or 3 years ago. But the book is still on process.
Did he excavate
Yes, sir.
with the National Museum?
Yes, sir. He has a formal training in at an Ateneo yata.
So he was excavating
And
with
his professor were from
And then what is the question then? What jars
his
were these?
professor is from England.
Yeah, but I don't care about
I
the
think that
jars.
somewhere Chinese during Chinese period, sir. I forgot the period in the dynasty of.
You're talking jars in caves that he excavated that are export of ceramics. These are tradeware jars from China. That's strange.
Actually, sir, I'm not really. I'm not privy about the types and the classification of jars, but he will soon publish the book.
But
My question is, my question is, what do you think are possible other research interest that can be done aside from naming or establishing the features of these jars?
Specific to those jars, I don't think. I mean, Chinese ceramics research is virtually all over the place. All you need to do is read a lot of books, mainly from China and from Hong Kong, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. But I don't understand the question in that sense now. You want to find out about what these jars are or what?
I mean, what I mean is other studies, sir, that could be done in relation to that.
It's my first time to hear of jars excavated in caves. I mean, I admit that. Because jars were put in caves but were never buried. I know in Mindanao, Subanans put jars in caves to store them, to hide them, and as an offering to their ancestors, but they're never buried. I've never experienced that. So I really don't, I don't know if Ryan can probably answer. Ryan is here. He's also steeped in archaeology from Pampanga, but he's done in Bohol. But I don't think. Yeah, Ryan, you answer that question, Ryan.
Sir De Taro, kasi you have to qualify. Are you talking of Philippine pottery, Philippine
Yeah,
ancient pottery, or trade ceramics, because those are two different things.
I think he's talking
Kasi,
about ceramics. That's
ay,
why I
sir,
was.
wala
Oh,
nang wala kasi ang Gigantes Island, ang nahanap po doon mga Philippine pottery. Pero they were looted.
Okay.
By the time po na i-check na siya ng mga Filipino archaeologists, basag-basag na or nauna na yung mga looters.
yeah. So that's it.
Parang wala po akong maalala na well, allegedly, sir, meron na matandang Tang Dynasty in Gigantes. Pero again, these are looted materials. We cannot verify the provenance and provenience of these artifacts.
Yes, I also heard that the provenance is the question, I think. But aside from that, sir, can you suggest other research that might be done in relation to that, whether it is loot or it is actually not looted? Or...
I think look for other caves na hindi pa na-loot. Kasi it's already looted, and remember nowadays, Gigantes Island is a tourist spot. So
Yes.
na-destroy na siya before, and I think the tourism that is happening there is impacting also the place. So I think the best thing to do is to look for other caves.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for that question and for answering, Sir Ryan. Thank you so much for all your questions and your comments. And once again, we'd like to thank Sir Jobbers for his keynote address, a very insightful and interesting one. So I think it's time for us to actually end our opening program. But before we close, I would like to remind everyone
11:29 naman.
That the evaluation form for this event will actually be given tomorrow at the end of the last afternoon session in order for you to actually have an e-certificate for this conference. Aside from that, we are going to send those e-certificates once you've submitted your evaluation forms through your email. So the reason why is for you to actually stick around and be more engaged in our conference, in our two-day conference. We are going to hear more presentations on our theme for this conference. Our afternoon session will start at 1 p.m. So you can actually log into Zoom once again at 1 p.m. or earlier. Probably 30 minutes before 1 p.m. so that we can actually start our session A to be followed by session B. So just for you to see the paper presentations, I'm gonna share my screen. All right, we have session A, Religious and Economic Life Amid the Pandemic. Starts from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. We have 4 paper presentations, followed by session B, Colonization and Globalization's Impact on Agriculture, Commodities, Beliefs, and Health. That'll be on 2:45 p.m. to 4:15. So we will have a very short break in between these two sessions. We also have 4 paper presentations for this. And a reminder before you log out of Zoom and probably have your lunch already, the link to the book of abstracts for this conference is already available on the chat box. So you can download the abstracts for you to actually look into the topics and different titles of the presentations this afternoon and up until tomorrow. Okay, aside from that, we are still going to have the live stream of this conference on the USC Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History page. So if you would like to invite other colleagues or other friends that might be interested in our discussions, then they can actually tune in on Facebook. So I hope that, like me, all of you were able to actually get a lot of insights with that keynote speech, and we are going to continue with our discussions on our theme, encountering colonization and the pandemic here in the Visayas, lived experiences. And we hope that you will join us once again at 1 p.m. for session A on religious and economic life amid the pandemic. All right, so I'll see you all again at 1 p.m. and have a great lunch and keep safe.